The Galactic Council met on the great station of Aranth Prime. The hall was full of sound and color from 100 different species. The air shimmered with the light of distant suns. Humans were few among the many, but everyone knew their presence was important. Captain Daniel Ross sat at the long table beside Commander Alicia Green. They had come from Earth to speak for their people. The humans had been part of the Council for many years. They had helped in wars and in peace missions. They had shared their machines and their ships and their ideas. Yet the others never truly saw them as equals. They saw them as useful but not vital. Daniel waited as Counselor Vela of the Vithari spoke. She stood tall and bright, her glass-like body glowing in shifting colors. Her voice carried across the hall like a cold wind. She said that humans were reckless. She said they were emotional and unpredictable. She said the Council could not depend on them to lead. The words hit the humans like a quiet insult. Alicia wanted to speak, but Daniel placed a hand on her arm. He waited until Vela was done. The room grew still. Daniel spoke in a calm voice. He said that humanity had done everything asked of them. He said that they had shed blood and resources to keep the peace. He said that they only asked for respect in return. But he saw in the faces around him that his words meant little. The other council members avoided his gaze. Some looked away. Others watched in silence. They had already decided what they wanted to believe. When the meeting ended, Daniel and Alicia walked through the long corridors of the station. The stars outside the glass walls looked cold and far away. Alicia spoke first. She said she was tired of the arrogance. She said she could not stand to see the others act as if humans were tools. Daniel said nothing for a while. Then he said maybe it was time to stop talking and start acting. They reached the docking bay where the human ships waited. The sleek gray hulls of the ships reflected the dim light. The crew members were silent but alert. They had heard the outcome of the meeting. They were waiting for orders. Daniel looked at Alicia. She nodded. They both knew what came next. Daniel sent a message to Earth. It was short and clear. He said that humans were to withdraw from all Council missions. He said that from this day forward humanity would not fight, trade, or serve under the Council banner. It was time for Earth to look after its own. The message traveled fast through the network of human stations and ships. Within hours, the word spread to every colony and every fleet. On Aranth Prime, the Council heard the news. Some of them laughed. They thought humans were only acting out of pride. They thought humans would come back when they saw how much they needed the Council. But they were wrong. The humans did not come back. They started to leave quietly. The halls that once echoed with human voices grew empty. The ships that carried human crews undocked and vanished into the dark. The machines they had built on the station shut down one by one. Counselor Vela stood before the great window and watched as the last human ship left. She felt no fear. She told herself the Council would manage without them. She said the humans were a small piece of a vast system, but deep inside her something uneasy stirred. She had seen the way other species depended on human systems. She had seen how human technology kept the fleets connected. She had seen how their trade routes fed half the galaxy. Still, she told herself it would be fine. Alicia stood on the bridge of her ship and watched the station shrink behind them. She felt a strange calm. For the first time, she felt that humanity was free. There was no shouting, no anger. There was only silence and the hum of engines. Daniel looked out at the stars. He said quietly that sometimes walking away is louder than any battle cry. Alicia nodded. They both knew the meaning of his words. The fleet gathered beyond the station in silent formation. Hundreds of ships waited for the command to return home. They carried people from different colonies and stations. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, and traders all were heading back to Earth. It was not exile. It was choice. They were not being pushed away. They were stepping away with purpose. The journey to Earth took weeks. During that time, Daniel spoke to his crew about what would come next. He said they would rebuild and focus on their own world. He said they would no longer waste effort trying to convince those who would not listen. He said they had given enough. Alicia worked beside him, making plans for the withdrawal from outer colonies. The crew members felt proud but also sad. They had friends among the other species. They had shared battles and victories. But they knew this had to happen. When they reached Earth, the sky was filled with lights. The fleets were already gathering in orbit. Thousands of ships from every corner of human space formed a shining ring around the planet. On the surface, cities glowed with energy. The people looked up and felt a mix of fear and hope. They had heard what happened at Arenth Prime. They knew the world was changing. But they trusted their leaders. Daniel stood in the command room of the orbital headquarters. He looked at the map of human space. So many worlds now disconnected from the Council. He saw the trade routes closing and the supply chains shifting inward. He knew it would not be easy. There would be shortages and hardship. But he also knew that humanity had always survived worse. He looked at Alicia and said they would build something better. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. She smiled faintly. She said the Council would soon realize what they had lost. Daniel agreed. But he said that by then it might be too late. The Council had made its choice. Humanity had made theirs, and now the galaxy would see what it meant when humans walked away quietly. The days after the meeting on Arenth Prime were filled with silence and motion as human ships drifted away from the Council territories. They left no message, no warning, no threat, only absence. The spaceports that once carried the sound of human laughter and the hum of their machines fell still. In the great docks of Arenth Prime, where engineers from Earth once worked side by side with aliens, now only dust floated in the air. The screens that once showed ship schedules and trade routes went dark one by one. Commander Alicia Green stood on the bridge of her ship and watched as the last human vessel disappeared into the void. She felt a quiet ache in her chest, but also a strange calm. It was not defeat, it was choice. Captain Daniel Ross spoke little during those days. He walked through the corridors of his ship, listening to the quiet murmur of the crew. They worked without complaint, packing equipment and closing down systems that had once served the Council fleets. They were tired, but they were steady. Daniel knew his people well. They would not rage or protest. They would simply do what needed to be done and then move on. That was what made humans different. They did not always shout, but when they acted, the galaxy noticed. On the distant colonies, the same thing was happening. On the desert world of Acheron, the human research outpost powered down its reactors and left behind the buildings in perfect order. On the green moon of Lyra, the farmers loaded the last of their crops into cargo bays and sent them toward Earth. On the trade hub of Valor Station, the merchants packed their goods into crates labeled Return to Sol. Everywhere across the stars, the quiet withdrawal spread like a tide. The other species watched in confusion. Some thought it was only a temporary protest. Some thought it was a trick. None of them understood it was the end. In the Council chambers, panic began to stir. Without human engineers, the repair lines slowed. Without human traders, the markets thinned. Without human diplomats, small disputes between species began to grow. Councillor Vela tried to calm the meetings. She said it was only a phase. She said the humans would return once they saw how empty the galaxy would feel without them. But every report that came in told the same story. The humans were gone and they were not answering calls. The messages sent to Earth returned with short automatic replies that said, "Thank you for your communication, your message has been received." That was all. Weeks passed. On the human side, the fleets moved through the cold space between stars. The crew of the Ardent Dawn looked out at the dark fields of stars and thought about what they had left behind. Alicia spent long hours in the observation deck writing reports and reading logs. She remembered the friends she had made among other races. She thought about how much they had achieved together, and how it all ended not with a war but with silence. Daniel joined her sometimes. He said it was better this way. He said humanity had to look after itself now. She asked him if he thought the Council would learn from this. He said maybe, but not soon. When the fleet reached Sol, the sight of Earth filled the windows with blue light. The oceans glowed like calm fire under the sun. The city sparkled with millions of lights. Daniel felt a weight lift from his heart. He thought of his grandparents who had seen the first ships leave for the stars. Now he was leading the return. The humans had come full circle. The ports in orbit around Earth were full of traffic as ships from every corner of human space came home. Cargo freighters from Mars research vessels from the moons of Jupiter, and colony ships from far systems joined together in silent formation. It was as if the entire species had taken one deep breath and was waiting for what came next. On the surface of Earth, the governments met and agreed to form the Terran Confederation. It would not be ruled by any alien law. It would be built by human hands for human goals. Scientists were already working on new engines and defenses that would no longer depend on Council technology. The factories that had once built parts for the Council fleets now turned their focus inward. A new kind of energy shield was being tested. A new communication network was being built that reached across all human colonies without touching the council grid. In a few months, humanity became something new, something stronger. But they did it quietly without boasting. Meanwhile, in the rest of the galaxy, things began to change. On the trade routes that humans once patrolled, pirates returned. The council fleets tried to respond, but their ships were slower, and their crews less organized. The systems humans had designed were too complex for others to manage. On the frontier worlds, riots broke out when food convoys failed to arrive. The Vithari tried to send help, but their ships ran out of supplies halfway. The smaller species began to whisper that the humans had taken something with them that no one else could replace. It was not only technology. It was stability. It was order. Daniel heard the reports and said nothing. He knew it would happen. Humanity had always been the quiet thread that held the council together. They had been the bridge between races that could not understand each other. Without that bridge, the whole structure began to crack. Alicia asked if they should reach out. Daniel shook his head. He said they offered peace and partnership for decades and were turned away. Now they would stay silent and see who would come knocking. Months later, the Ardent Dawn was stationed above the moon base where hundreds of engineers were working on new ship designs. Daniel visited the site and spoke with the workers. They told him they were building something better, something free from the council's influence. He smiled and told them to keep building. On his way back, he looked out at Earth rising over the horizon and thought how quiet the galaxy must seem now that humans were gone. On Arenth Prime, the council meetings grew tense. The chambers that once echoed with human voices now felt too large. The alien delegates argued over trade laws and defense matters. The networks were failing. The peace treaties once maintained by human diplomats began to collapse. Counselor Vela found herself staring out of the same window where she had once watched the last human ship leave. The stars beyond looked cold. She began to wonder if the humans had taken more than ships and machines with them. Maybe they had taken the heart of the galaxy itself. She tried to reach Daniel Ross through private channels. The message bounced back unread. Far away in the quiet of deep space, Daniel sat on the bridge of his ship, watching the flow of traffic in the Sol system. The humans were working, rebuilding, planning, and dreaming again. He felt pride, but also sadness. He did not hate the council. He simply no longer believed in it. He turned to Alicia and said softly that sometimes silence teaches louder than words. She nodded and said maybe one day they will listen. Daniel smiled faintly. He said when they do, humanity will already be far ahead, building its own destiny among the stars. The silence of humanity spread through the galaxy like a shadow, and the Galactic Council began to feel the weight of it. Without human ships to guard the trade routes, small pirate groups grew bold and attacked convoys that once moved safely. The Council fleets tried to stop them, but their systems were slow and the crews uncoordinated. The human-made logistics networks that had linked hundreds of worlds started to fail because no one understood them the way humans did. The machines still worked, but there were no human engineers to guide them, and soon the stations that depended on their skill began to break down. Counselor Vela called for a meeting, but even as she spoke, her own world was struggling to maintain power. The once proud Vithari fleets were grounded for lack of working engines built under human design. Daniel Ross heard about these troubles from far away, but he said nothing. He was no longer part of their council. He spent his days overseeing the construction of new defense stations around the human worlds. Every day the work went faster and smoother. Humans were building for themselves now, and they worked with quiet purpose. Alicia Green visited one of the orbital shipyards where giant new cruisers were being built. She spoke with workers who had left their colonies to help rebuild the home system. They said they felt proud again. They said it felt good to build something that belonged only to them. She watched the new ships rise from the docks and thought that no one outside the Sol system had any idea how fast humanity was growing. Meanwhile, on Arenth Prime, the Council's meetings became arguments. The delegates blamed each other for the loss of order. The merchants from the trade worlds demanded that the Vithari take responsibility for lost shipments. The Vithari accused the Drellon of taking advantage of the chaos. The Drellon accused the Council of weakness. No one spoke of the humans anymore, at least not out loud. But every delegate knew that the peace and stability of the galaxy had depended on them more than anyone had admitted. The humans had not led by force but by reliability. They had been the ones others trusted to fix things, to mediate disputes, to build what others could not. Now that they were gone, everyone could see how much of the galaxy had rested on their quiet shoulders. On the world of Hentaris 9, a food shortage turned into riots. The Council had promised aid, but the convoys never arrived. The human trade routes that once kept supplies moving had been closed. People began to starve. A small group of human-built drones still patrolled the system, protecting what little remained of the colonies that humans had once helped settle. They did not answer calls for help. Their programming followed only human commands. The local leaders sent desperate messages to the Council begging for assistance. The Council sent a fleet, but it arrived too late. The riots had destroyed the cities, and the survivors fled into the wastelands. News of this spread fast. The Council began to look like a crumbling empire. Daniel watched all this through intercepted broadcasts. He felt no joy in it, but he also felt no regret. He told Alicia that they had warned them for years. He said humans had offered to help build a stronger council, one based on fairness and respect, but they had been ignored. Alicia said maybe the Council would learn now. Daniel said maybe, but he doubted it. He said the galaxy had to learn through consequence. He said that some lessons required silence, not speeches. In the factories on Mars, new engines came online. The humans had found ways to improve the designs they once shared with the Council. They worked faster, used less fuel, and could travel farther. The scientists spoke with pride about how the Confederation no longer needed alien resources. The moons of Jupiter became centers of research. The mining stations of Saturn began producing rare materials in large quantities. Every day, the Terran Confederation grew stronger and more independent, and yet they made no effort to boast or threaten. They just built and moved forward while the galaxy outside grew weaker. Back in the Council chambers, Vela called for another emergency session. The reports were grim. The frontier worlds were breaking away from the Council. Trade guilds refused to pay taxes. Even the Drellin fleets were suffering because the navigation systems made by human scientists were beginning to fail without proper maintenance. Some of the systems were encrypted and no one could repair them. Vela's advisors said they should send envoys to Earth to ask for technical assistance. Vela resisted at first. Her pride told her that the Council could fix this on its own. But then her home planet lost contact with 3 of its colonies, and the riots reached her own cities. She realized the truth. The Council was falling apart. Alicia Green was at the Terran Command Center when they received the first message from the Council. It came through a secure channel. The message asked for a meeting. It said the Council wished to restore relations. It said they were willing to negotiate. Daniel read the message and placed it aside. He said there would be no reply. He said they would let the silence continue until the Council understood not just that humans were needed, but why. He said they had to learn respect, not dependency. Alicia agreed, though she felt a small sadness. She said she once believed in unity, but now she only believed in strength through independence. Daniel said both could exist, but not under arrogance. Weeks passed, and the Council sent more messages, each more desperate than the last. They promised new alliances, new treaties, new recognition. None of the messages were answered. The humans had sealed their borders. No alien ship was allowed into Terran space. Automated defense platforms marked the boundaries with invisible walls of energy. The few who tried to cross were warned once and then turned away. No shots were fired. The humans did not need to show force. Their silence was enough. Out in the wider galaxy, systems continued to crumble. Wars began on the edge of known space where old rivalries returned. Without human mediators, there was no one to calm them. The Vithari fleets fought the Drellin over mineral rights. The smaller species began to form new alliances, hoping to survive the growing unrest. The Council tried to send peacekeepers, but their fleets were too few. Even the great Arenth Prime Station began to lose power. Vela watched as lights flickered in the Council chamber. She stood before the empty seats where the human delegation had once sat and finally whispered to herself that they had been wrong. On Earth, Daniel and Alicia stood on the balcony of the new headquarters overlooking the oceans. The night was quiet except for the soft hum of ships passing above the clouds. Daniel said the galaxy would remember this time. Alicia asked if he thought they would ever go back. He said maybe one day when the galaxy learns what humility means. For now they would watch and build and wait. He looked out at the stars and saw the faint lights of the human defense grid shining like a constellation of steel. He said softly that the Council would soon see that silence can be louder than any threat. Alicia nodded. She said they were already seeing it. The two of them stood in silence watching the night sky, knowing that the world had changed and that humanity had finally found its own place among the stars. The years that followed were quiet but heavy with change. Across the stars, the Council tried to keep control, but everything was falling apart. Trade routes that had once been full of movement were now empty. Ships floated abandoned near old relay stations where no one came to repair them. The colonies that had relied on human engineers found their systems breaking down. The weather shields failed on some planets and crops died. The Council sent what help they could, but the fleets were slow and the crews frightened. Every report spoke of systems in crisis. Some planets turned on each other. Some declared independence. Some went dark and were never heard from again. On Earth, things were different. The Terran Confederation grew stronger every year. The cities were filled with work and light. The shipyards in orbit were always busy building new vessels faster and stronger than any before. The new human designs were sleek and powerful and did not depend on any alien parts. The scientists worked on engines that could reach farther than the old routes known to the Council. Humanity was no longer just part of the galaxy. They were ready to explore beyond it. Daniel Ross watched this growth from his office above the Pacific coast. He saw how far his people had come in so short a time. Alicia Green came often to see him. They talked about the progress reports and the new colonies being planned near the outer systems. She said it felt strange to think of how quiet the stars had become without the Council's voice. Daniel said the quiet was a good thing. It meant peace for humanity at last, but even peace had its shadows. Many humans had friends among the other races. Some of them still received messages begging for help. A few small ships went out on their own to rescue people from collapsing worlds. The government did not stop them, but did not send them either. Humanity had made its choice to step away, but compassion still ran deep. On one of those missions, a small freighter called the Hope's Reach saved hundreds of refugees from a dying colony. They brought them to the edge of Terran space where they were given food and shelter. The refugees spoke of chaos in the Council worlds. They said no one trusted the Council anymore. They said the Council was breaking apart. Daniel listened to their stories and felt a quiet sadness. He said the galaxy had been given every chance. He said now it must face the cost of its pride. Meanwhile, Councillor Vela struggled to hold what remained of the Council together. The great chamber on Arenth Prime was half empty now. Many of the seats were vacant. Some species had left to form their own alliances. Others had vanished into silence. Vela spoke to those who remained and told them they had to reach out to the humans. She said they could not survive without their help. But the others were too proud or too afraid. They said the humans would never forgive them. They said it was better to try to rebuild on their own. Vela disagreed. She said the humans did not want control, they wanted respect. But no one listened. She sent messages herself through the few channels still working. Every one of them came back unanswered. She began to fear that the humans had closed the door for good. Alicia spent her days in the command centers of the Terran Defense Fleet, watching the growth of the new systems. The human borders now stretched wider than ever before. The colonies were linked by powerful relay networks and guarded by new automated stations. Everything worked perfectly. There was no crime, no unrest, and no shortage. She often thought about the difference between the quiet order of the Confederation and the chaos of the Council. She asked Daniel once if he thought the galaxy would ever recover. He said maybe one day when they stop thinking of themselves as rulers and start thinking of themselves as partners. He said humans had learned that lesson through pain. Now others would too. In the outer regions, a new kind of rumor began to spread. Some said human ships had been seen beyond the known borders. They said these ships were exploring places no one had gone before. They said humans were mapping the void between galaxies. The Council tried to send probes to confirm it, but the probes never returned. It was as if the humans had built an invisible wall around their space. Some called it isolation. Others called it freedom. The truth was somewhere between. Humanity was no longer angry. They were simply done explaining themselves. On a cold night in New Geneva, Daniel stood before a group of young cadets. He told them the story of the Council and how humanity had walked away. He said they must never forget why. He said respect was worth more than power and silence could be stronger than weapons. The cadets listened in quiet awe. To them, the Council was already part of history. They had grown up in a world where humanity stood alone and proud. They did not remember the years of begging for a seat at the table. They only knew that humans built their own table now. Daniel felt proud but also a little weary. He wondered if one day those lessons would fade again. Far from Earth on the rim of Council space, a planet called Varnus was falling into chaos. Its atmosphere processors were failing, and the people had no way to fix them. The last message they sent was a plea for help. They said only the humans could save them. The message drifted through space until it reached the edge of Terran communication range. An operator saw it and sent it to Alicia. She read it and brought it to Daniel. He said they could help, but they would not make a show of it. He said they would send a small ship in secret. It would carry supplies and repair drones. No one would know. Alicia agreed. The ship went and the planet was saved. The people never learned who had helped them. It was not about thanks. It was about doing what was right. The months passed and the gap between the humans and the rest of the galaxy grew wider. The Council continued to crumble. Some of its last members finally admitted their mistakes. They sent one last message to Earth saying they wished to meet and make peace. Daniel read the message but waited. He said they would come when they were ready to listen with humility, not fear. He said until then humanity would remain silent. Alicia asked if he thought that day would come. He said yes, but not soon. He said understanding takes time. On Arenth Prime, Vela watched the stars from her window. The station was dim now. Many of the lights had gone out. She thought of the humans and the way they had left without anger. She realized they had not abandoned the galaxy. They had simply chosen peace on their own terms. She whispered to herself that maybe they had been right. She hoped they would forgive the rest of them someday. Back on Earth, Daniel stood on the balcony of the command building as dawn broke over the ocean. The light touched the waves and the sky turned gold. Alicia joined him and they stood together watching the sunrise. Daniel said the galaxy was learning through pain what humans had already learned through struggle. He said that sometimes walking away was the only way to make others see. Alicia said maybe the Council would one day find its balance again. Daniel said maybe, and when they do, humanity will be there waiting not as servants but as equals. They watched the sun climb higher and said nothing more. The sound of waves below was soft and calm and the sky was bright with promise. Humanity had walked away quietly, but the echo of that choice was still traveling through the stars. Years passed and the galaxy slowly tried to rebuild itself, but the scars left by the fall of the Council never fully healed. Many worlds were lost to war or famine, and the great networks that once tied everything together were gone. Only fragments of the old alliances remained. The name of the Galactic Council became something spoken with regret. People told stories about how it had fallen apart when the humans walked away. Some said the humans had cursed the galaxy. Others said the humans had simply seen the truth sooner than the rest. Whatever people believed, everyone agreed on one thing. Nothing worked the same after the humans left. On Earth, life moved forward. The Terran Confederation grew into a vast and stable union. The skies above the planet were filled with ships and stations. The new colonies on the edge of human space were thriving. Children grew up hearing stories about the days of the Council, but those stories felt distant like legends from another age. They did not remember a time when humans were treated as less. To them, humanity was strong, united, and proud. Daniel Ross was older now, and his hair had turned gray, but his mind was sharp and his voice steady. He no longer commanded fleets, but he was still respected as one of the leaders who had guided humanity through its quiet revolution. He spent most of his time teaching young officers and helping shape the future of the Confederation. One morning, Daniel stood in the gardens of New Geneva watching the sunrise. The air was cool and clear. He thought about how peaceful Earth had become. Alicia Green joined him carrying a report from the outer colonies. She said the new systems near the Orion Belt were ready for settlement. She said the explorers had found a chain of habitable worlds untouched and full of life. Daniel smiled. He said the universe still had room for wonder. He said humans had earned the right to explore it on their own terms. Alicia said the Council would envy them if it still existed. Daniel said maybe envy was what had broken it in the first place. Far from Earth, a ship approached from deep space. It was old and worn and carried the colors of the old Galactic Council. Its engine sputtered as it entered the Sol system. Automated defenses scanned it but did not fire. The ship sent a signal asking permission to approach. The request was routed to the command center on Earth. Alicia was there when the alert came through. She looked at the signature and frowned. It was genuine. It was a council vessel, or what was left of one. She called Daniel and asked what they should do. He told her to let it land. He said it was time to listen again, but not to kneel. When the ship arrived at New Geneva, it looked ancient compared to the sleek human vessels. Its hull was covered in scars and missing panels. From the ramp stepped Counselor Vela, her crystalline body dim and cracked. The years had not been kind to her. She walked slowly but with purpose. Daniel waited for her at the base of the landing pad, surrounded by a small honor guard. There was no anger in his eyes, only calm patience. Vela stopped in front of him and bowed her head. She said she had come to speak for what little remained of the council. She said they had been wrong. She said they had not understood the humans until it was too late. Daniel listened without interrupting. Vela said the galaxy was in ruins and that the other races were scattered and afraid. She said they needed guidance. She said they needed humanity. Her voice was soft and tired. She said they had come to ask not for control or help, but for forgiveness. Daniel looked at her for a long moment. He said forgiveness was not something to ask for with words. He said it had to be shown through action. He said the humans had no wish to rule anyone. He said they only wanted respect. Vela nodded. She said they had learned that too late. She said they wanted to make things right. Daniel turned and gestured for her to follow him. Together they walked through the gardens toward the Hall of the Confederation. The air smelled of rain and flowers. Vela looked around in silence, taking in the beauty of the place. She said it was peaceful here. Daniel said it was because people had learned to listen. He said silence can teach what words never can. He said the galaxy had learned that the hard way. Inside the hall, Vela saw the symbols of the new Confederation. They were simple circles joined by thin lines representing unity and balance. She said it was beautiful. Daniel said it was built by people who remembered what it felt like to be ignored. He said that was why it would last. Vela asked if humanity would return to the stars beyond its borders. Daniel said they already had. He said humanity was exploring the unknown, but not as conquerors. He said they went with quiet curiosity. Vela said she hoped they would not forget the rest of the galaxy. Daniel said they never would. He said they just needed to be sure the galaxy had learned something from its mistakes. They talked for a long time. Vela told him about the scattered worlds that still followed the old council laws. She said they were trying to build again, but they lacked leadership. Daniel said leadership did not mean giving orders. He said it meant setting an example. He said that was all humanity had ever tried to do. Vela said she understood now. She said she wished she had understood sooner. Daniel said it was not too late to start again. He said the galaxy was vast and there was always room for new beginnings. When their talk was done, Daniel walked her back to the ship. He told her that Earth would not join any council again, but it would open its doors to those who came in peace. He said humanity would share knowledge and trade fairly, but it would never again serve under arrogance. Vela thanked him. She said she would tell her people what she had seen. She said she would tell them that the humans had not abandoned the galaxy. They had saved it by showing it what pride could destroy. Daniel nodded. He said the galaxy would heal, but it would take time. He said healing always does. As the ship lifted into the sky, Alicia came to stand beside Daniel. She asked what he thought would happen next. Daniel said the galaxy would rebuild in its own way. He said some would learn and some would not. He said that was the way of all things. Alicia said she hoped Vela's people would find peace. Daniel said they would if they listened. He said listening was the beginning of wisdom. That night, Daniel stood on the balcony of his home overlooking the city. The stars above were bright and clear. He thought about the long years that had passed since the day they walked away from the council. He thought about the silence that had followed and how much it had taught the galaxy. He thought about the cost and the reward. Alicia joined him and handed him a glass of tea. She said the counselor's ship had left the system. She said she had sent her back with maps and supplies. Daniel smiled. He said that was good. He said mercy was a lesson too. They stood together watching the stars. The night was quiet and the city below shimmered with light. Daniel said the universe was finally balanced again. He said it had taken loss to teach the truth. Alicia said the truth was simple. She said respect is what holds everything together. Daniel nodded. He said that was all humanity had ever wanted. The stars shone brighter as if agreeing with him. In the silence of space, the echo of humanity's choice still lingered, carrying with it a message that would never fade. The humans had walked away quietly, and because of that, the galaxy had finally learned to listen.